Sorry, I just finished up a client. I was ready to go to lunch, and then I saw the pop up for the link for this, and I thought, trauma informed. Who's doing trauma work on campus? So this is
Right.
great, and everything that you guys are talking about is really great. I've been a licensed therapist for about 25 years. I've been at BC for about 7 or 8 years. And the message that I'm trying to get to as many students as I can is that what really gets us stuck is kind of counterintuitive. We know it theoretically, but we don't typically apply it to ourselves. And that is that our brain internalizes the reality of our childhood. And if we grew up with criticism, judgment, too high expectations, sexual abuse, physical abuse, it always leads to the same emotional state, which is, I'm not good enough. And some people are able to successfully push that away and just deal with life. But when there's a certain level of stress and the difficulty level increases, that feeling comes to the surface. And that's when everybody basically goes into that reality of, I'm not good enough. And they start avoiding, procrastinating. That recreates the feeling of shame and guilt that they grew up with. So if students don't see this, they simply don't utilize the positive coping skills that we teach them. They self-sabotage instead. So they have to understand that what they're struggling with is their own recreation of the shame and guilt that they experienced from childhood. It's completely unconscious, but that's really what procrastination and avoidance is about, is kind of throwing in the towel and saying, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, I'm going to go do something else. When they realize that it's only repetition and it has nothing to do with their actual capability, then the light goes off in their mind and they start seeing, oh crap, I've been doing this to myself all my life. So we can throw all of the positive coping skills at people, but if they don't understand what the resistance really is, and it's just the brain wanting familiarity, if they don't understand that, they'll just keep thinking, I'm not good enough and the world is too hard. But when they get this information, it's like, oh, I just need to stop repeating, the crappy feeling that I grew up in. It creates a shift and an opening. And to me, it's a hopeful message, because it's not that they're not capable, and that's what they believe. And the people who are getting stuck, 99% are the people who grew up with trauma. 90, everybody I see, it's the same thing. They're doing okay, but then the difficulty level gets to a certain degree, and then it triggers that state, I'm not good enough, and then they fall apart. And it becomes a cycle. And it's kind of like we internalize the cycle of abuse and we do it to ourselves. We become motivated by guilt because guilt is what motivated us in childhood. And so when we dig ourselves in a hole, we get behind, we feel guilty and we procrastinate and avoid. When the guilt gets painful enough, then we kick into action. But the problem is, when we get caught up, the guilt is gone and the motivation is gone. And so the person doesn't keep going until they fall back into that state where they start feeling guilty again. And it just becomes a lifelong cycle. And it's really the internalization of the cycle of abuse. It's like good self, bad self, bouncing back and forth between good self and bad self. So I'm trying everything I can to get this message across to students. I have a YouTube channel and I do a lot of relaxation videos, but I have a couple talks also. But any efforts that people are making on campus to, forward the message that trauma, it's not that people remember it and then fall apart. It's already done its work by wiring the brain to feel what it feels. So it's kind of like we're stuck in the reality of our childhood when the reality of the present is infinitely bigger than the reality of our childhood. But we project the reality of our childhood onto the present, and it narrows it down to the same experiences. So people have the same, they blame the same kinds of people and come up with the same excuses, but they're really talking about their childhood. So that's my work, and I appreciate you guys helping me out. This is great.
Thank you so much, Dave. So what recommendations would you have for faculty who are working with students and supporting students? What would you recommend they do for students who are starting to get into that pattern?
If you can convince them that their ability is greater than what they think it is, if that's the case. Sometimes that's not the case, but the vast majority of the time it is the case. And that there's if they're stuck in these kinds of patterns, then there's a high likelihood that it's because they internalize that state in childhood because of abuse or whatever. You have to be careful about wording when you're working with this population, because anything that smacks of mental health, they don't want anything to do with. Sometimes that's cultural. It's just there's a predominant belief that if you seek treatment, you're weak. So a lot of instructors have walked students over to the student health center to schedule an appointment with the therapist because they've seen that the student is falling apart emotionally. Another thing to do is refer them to the Students of Concern team through the Starfish program. And then they get kind of a safety net built around them. But the things that you guys are talking about are really important. The blocking, I stress that to everybody. And it's important because it's the fear in the anticipation of doing homework that makes people procrastinate or avoid. And if you tell them all you have to do is the footwork, it doesn't matter how much you get done. If you do the footwork for 1 hour, I promise you're going to get more done than you think you will. And it takes the anxiety and fear out of the way because they only have to do it for an hour and it doesn't matter how much they get done. I have to do that myself because I get into fear about, stuff that I have to do. So I know if I'm struggling with it, the students that have experienced trauma, they're probably struggling with it too. So showing interest in the students, not just being critical. A lot of teachers take it personal when their students aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then they get irritated at the students. So just treating them with dignity, regardless of who they are. That's basically it. But I would love to be involved in doing more of this. I don't want to take over your guys, your meeting, and I do have to get some food or I'm going to pass out before the afternoon. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and I'll be back in touch. And thank you for giving me platform for 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it. Have a good lunch.
Thank you guys. Look forward to talking more. I'm sorry I can't stay and listen more.
No, we really appreciate it. Thank you.